Hello everyone. On today's command tutorial, we're going to be looking at electronic warfare. Now, electronic warfare is one of those subjects that's very, very complicated, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it. And the good news is the people who developed command realized how complicated of a topic it was, and were able to kind of simplify things so that we can still get the benefits of electronic warfare plus some of the tactics and strategy without having to deal with the minutia, which gets pretty intense. So, quick background on electronic warfare. Basically, the goal of electronic warfare or electronic attack is basically to deny the other guy the ability to use their electronic assets. So in the old days, that would basically be making so much noise that the other guy can't see through the noise to know where you were. In modern times, we have things like directed EMP, so we can actually electronically destroy things now. But we're not going to deal with EMP in this particular tutorial. You're welcome to play with that on your own. So anyway, the scenario we have here is pretty straightforward. We're sitting here in the Falklands, basically. I'm sure you remember what happened here. It's modern times, though, so this is obviously going to be a neat little scenario. What I've done is I've set up a group of different types of jammers all kind of over here in a little loop here, and I'm going to actually use them to sort of demonstrate how the different types of jamming works. Talking about different types of jamming, we have two big families of jamming, and again, jamming is electronic attack. There's also electronic support measures, but I'm not going to get into that because that's a whole, like I said, I'm not even going to go there. There's also communication jamming, something that we can't do well in our version of command. They actually accidentally patched it so that you could play with communication disruption at one point. I'm talking communications jamming, not just clicking a button to disable the communications. It was terrifying what you can do with that technology. So another day, as they say, another day. So anyway, basically we have two different types of jamming. We have offensive jamming, where basically you're trying to create so much noise the other guy can't see through the noise to get a reliable hit on you. And then you have defensive jamming, which also, in my mind, I like to consider it as deception jamming. That's basically, instead of making a lot of noise, you're trying to present the person locking onto you with something that is difficult to lock onto. So for example, one of the classic methods is what they call range gate pull-off. What would happen is they lock onto you, they'd set a range gate on you, and then you'd create a false echo of yourself. Basically, if you want to imagine, you'd get something that looks kind of like this off of yourself ending up on the other guy's radar screen. So if he was locked onto you, his locking tool would actually follow the different beams that you are creating defensively. Again, that's a really, really cool technology. You could also use defensive jamming as well to do something that looks like this on the other guy's radar, even though this is the only one over here. And of course, you have the funky jamming, like I like to say, like your angle jamming and stuff like that, where basically he's going to lock onto the center of you, and then you're going to create a false little echo off the side of you that will cause his missiles to basically always turn away from you as they approach. So basically, we don't have to worry about those individual types of jamming because in this game, there's only offensive and defensive. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and start with taking a look at database entries. As usual, research is very, very critical. So like I said, we have two different kinds of jamming. How do they impact things? The offensive is going to be basically taking radars offline. It's going to prevent them from getting range, things like that. Defensive is simplified significantly because basically all it's going to do is a PK reduction. We'll take a look at that in a minute. So anyway, we'll go ahead and grab a pretty standard aircraft here. 1980s, we have an EF-111 Raven. This is an amazing aircraft. If I click on it and scroll down to its sensors and EW, you'll notice it's got these APQ-110s and an APQ-160s. As you know, the P basically is a radar, so that's not what we're interested in. Here we go. We have some listening and airborne listening electronic. Scooting down here, we finally have our AN-ALQ-99E. This is OECM. And this, of course, the DECM is going to be the ALQ-137 here. So this doesn't really tell us much. It does tell us one thing, though. If you actually scoot all the way over here, it tells you what generation the technology is, and it also tells you what electronic bands you're working on. You have to jam the other guy with the bands that your jammer supports. So, for example, this one only works on the E, F, G, H, and I, J bands. If somebody was down here in the B and the A, or even past the J, you wouldn't be able to jam them at all. So that would be essentially worthless. So kind of keep that in the back of your head. Now, this doesn't really help us though. Like, what are we supposed to do? How does this tell us what we can defeat here? Well, it turns out if you were to look at an enemy aircraft or any enemy electronic unit, it'll tell you what technology they have, I should say, for their particular radars. That's not a great example there. We'll go ahead and get an E2. There we go. So you notice here, this particular radar is early 80s technology, and it also gives you, of course, what generation is. I'm sorry, that's electronic intelligence. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. So you can see this is in the B band. If we went back to the F-117, you realize you wouldn't actually be able to jam him on the same band. So there's another important thing here that you can't really see with jammers, which is really kind of a shame in this database viewer, and that is how many bands you can jam at a time. So that basically says if I have a radar looking at you, that's one band. If I have 19 radars looking at you, that's 19 bands. You can't jam them all if they're on different frequencies. So that's a common mistake is people are like, oh, I'm all set, I got it. But then the enemy will flip on a couple of their radars, say they're battery radar or something like that, and suddenly you're no good. So kind of keep that in the back of your head as well. If you're looking to get even more information about a particular jamming set, you can actually come over here, go to the website Belugan Wiki, and you can actually go to specific jamming units. So for example, I don't think we have the F-111, but we do have an F-16CM. Let's go ahead and grab that real quick. This is a great resource, by the way. It's almost a better database, when it works, I might add that, than what you already get inside the game. But if I were, for example, to go look up this Block 52, I could scoot down here and actually see the different types of technology I have on board. I believe we have an ALQ on this one. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. So now if I were to actually click on the pod and then click on the actual ALQ, it would give you the specific details of that particular jamming unit. In this case, all this would do is reduce the percentage of being hit by a radar missile by 20%, which is actually fairly substantial. Now, of course, if I were to go get something that had offensive ECM, such as a B-52, let's go ahead and get the H model there. And if you scroll on down here, let's go get some offensive. This is an ALT-28. Scrolling down, now you get this information. We get the gain, we get the power, we get the bandwidth, and here's that all-important number of channels it can block at a time. This is important. Some aircraft actually, because of the geometry of the antenna, can only block in specific directions. They can only block in specific directions at specific times, so it's really important to understand this here. So if there are 5 enemy radars working on different frequencies, they would have a very, very tough time jamming them at once. Okay, enough of the theory stuff. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. So the first thing we're interested in is going to be offensive jamming. So I'm actually going to switch sides here real quickly. Radar force. And I have this little building here. This is kind of neat. If I go to sensors page, you'll notice that there is a ton of radar dishes at this particular location. What's the deal? This is a 1950s radar set. This is an extremely super ultra modern set, basically from the 2030s, essentially is what it's going to be, and everything pretty much in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this radar on real quick. So the first thing I notice is that it has a tremendously short range because it is a classic radar set. I'm going to go ahead and turn things on. Go ahead and switch to the other side real quick. Now notice, okay, yeah, it's automatic detection. These guys who are just kind of doing little air donuts here don't pick up that radar set. Whenever you turn a radar on, you can detect it with ESM out to about double to triple the range, depending on how sophisticated your equipment is. Now, if I were to take my 1980s jammer, and I'm going to put it right here real quick, switch to the other team real quick. Let's see if we can actually acquire. I don't think he's quite. No, he's in range. He's in range. It's just not a very good radar set, unfortunately. Oh, there he is. Got him. Now notice, with this 1950s radar tech, we're able to spot this target. We have roughly a bearing on him. We know roughly how fast he's going. We have no idea how high he is, because again, these are old 2D radars. Now watch what happens if I were to click on this target. Notice, by the way, and this is really important, that we're able to acquire that target even though he has defensive ECM. Now notice what happens if I come down here and click on this button here. His little jam light goes on. Let's go ahead and switch back to our radar. Notice it now says the word jammed. If you use offensive countermeasures, the other team will know you're jamming them. It's not like Star Wars where they couldn't figure out that the shield was not up on the Death Star because they got, quote, jammed. You would know you were being jammed. Now notice this target has vanished. Early radar technology had what they call really lousy side lobes. So you basically could blind the radar's complete display just by jamming it a little bit, because as the radar rotated, you could basically get electronic signals in from the side. So in this case, he's gone. We cannot see that target at all. As a matter of fact, if I were to grab a non-jamming target, let's just grab ourselves something nice and classic here. Oop, we want to make sure we set that to aircraft. My apologies. Let's go ahead and get ourselves a 2014 Mountain. I don't care what it's carrying. Now, if I put him here, watch this. Check it out. I can't see it. Even though the jamming, offensive jamming, is coming from here, I can't even see the F-16 over here because this guy's display is toast. So that's, again, an immediate and very, very amazing use of using very, very modern jammers against very classic jammers. Now watch this. We're going to go over to sensors. And I'm going to go ahead and shut this one off. And I'm going to go ahead and get a 1960s, pretty much an early 1960s radar. I'm going to go ahead and flick that sucker on. So watch what happens this time. Interesting. So the first thing you notice is because it has a better focus of a radar, it is able to actually see my little F-16 buddy over here, and it can even acquire these other aircraft over here. Obviously, it can't see this airplane because it's a line of sight issue whenever you're doing offensive jamming here. But this target that's doing the jamming is still completely invisible because it's basically leveling the view of this guy right here. Very interesting. So let's go ahead and get a slightly more modern radar. Let's go ahead and get something from pretty much the early 80s. Now notice, we have perfect acquiring of all these targets basically through the jamming that we see, but we still cannot get a shot on the jammer itself. Up there he is. Notice, because the technology of the radar is roughly as good as the jammer, we're still able to acquire the target. Keep in mind our little F-16 buddy here is completely visible. So this jamming, offensive jamming, again, remember you're just trying to blast him with noise so you can't figure out how far away you are, is basically worthless against that particular radar set. Now, of course, if we got a very modern radar, let's go ahead and get a APY-9 is like cheating. Watch this. I believe that might be a surface search, is it? No, it's air and search. I'm sorry. Ta-da! Not only is the jamming completely useless, but we can actually basically read the serial numbers off the side of those aircraft. So it's very, very interesting to see how generation affects jamming. All right, let me go ahead and shut that back off for a second here. Okay, so how do we work with this? How do we manipulate this and things along those lines? Keep in mind, when you're using offensive jamming, you're basically flooding the other guy with noise, which means if you flood him with noise from over here, anything between you and him are potentially invisible until you get close enough for the radar to actually burn through and see the targets. So again, you have to be very, very careful about how you employ it like that. Also remember, there are weapons that can actually home in automatically on aircraft that jam you. So kind of keep that in mind. Of course, if you're homing in something that's jamming, it's going to be an imprecise target. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at what happens if you use more than one jammer at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. I'm going to crank the, actually I'm going to go back to sensors window. We'll go ahead and get the, let's get something semi-modern, not too modern. Let's go ahead and turn on the FPS 117. That's a pretty modern radar. Notice he's still jamming. I'm going to go ahead and get that F-16. I'm going to put it right here. This will make sense in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and borrow this 1970s jammer. I'm going to put him right there. Go ahead and flip on his offensive ECM. By the way, DECM is always on. Let's go. I'm not going to borrow the 2020s jammer. That's cheating. Okay, so now we have two jammers basically trying to blanket this area simultaneously. If we scoot back to this side, observe. We are easily able to acquire that F-16 that's in front of us, but we're having a tougher time acquiring that newer jammer. Basically, if you take two sets of jammers next to each other, they're going to kind of add to each other. They're not really going to multiply. If I put my F-16 on the other side of these jammers, watch what happens. So in this case, I expect, yeah, that's kind of what I expected. That is a really, really good radar, so maybe we want to take it down a notch, kind of, so to speak. We'll do a TPS-43. Hopefully that'll do the trick and demonstrate things pretty clearly here. Not really. So the only way we could make this jamming more effective is we'd have to actually physically move everybody farther away. So you can see, look at the range on this thing. So if I were to do something like this, let's see if that makes it a little bit better so you can see it in effect. Because remember, the reason, by the way, it takes time for we to reacquire the targets is we have to swing that radar in a big circle. Yeah, that worked perfectly. So now notice we're no longer able to actually acquire these particular targets because these guys are basically jamming, including this one here. When you're jamming, you're basically creating a wall of noise, almost like a sector of noise. So this F-16 that is not jamming is actually completely invisible right now, which is kind of cool. So if I were to do something like this, let me actually move him like that, and just order him to fly directly towards the radar station. We'll go ahead and switch to radar 4 real quick. Go ahead and speed up time real quick. Observe. We still can't identify the guys jamming it. We know we're jamming, but this particular target right here, let's speed up time, is completely invisible to us because that jamming wall is basically blanking out the sector. We won't be able to see this aircraft until it's just about right on top of. Oh, did you see it? We caught it for a second there, and then we lost it again, but we've completely lost the actual source of the jamming. It's very interesting. Let's speed up time one more time. Now notice this F-16, oh, we got him again. Yeah, okay. Let me go ahead and, okay. So at this point now, the jamming is not strong enough to hide our non-jamming target. Okay. By the way, there are offensive ECM drones out there. I think the MALD, if you look it up, you can actually launch jammers that fly. Okay, let's talk about defensive jamming now. So that's the basic gist of the offensive jamming. It's pretty effective. Of course, if I were to go back over here and order all these guys to turn the jamming on together because I'm like that, I still don't think I'll be able to completely block them out. We'll try. Just as, as an experiment. Okay, he's active. Let's turn him on active also. You're a DECM example, so it doesn't matter. So we'll turn everybody's jammer on. Let's see what that does for our poor buddy here. Now notice the older jammer is still visible. The newer jammers are not. Of course, if we flew these jammers right up to this guy, things would change pretty quickly. These aircraft naturally are not going to show up very well. Okay. By the way, when you are jamming with offensive jamming, you have to keep in mind the geometry of the situation. As this aircraft gets closer at the same altitude, it's actually going to fly above the corridor of jamming. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. I'm actually going to tell him to go over here real quick. Okay, let's talk about defensive jamming. Now, defensive jamming, DECM, I should basically say, is basically, like I said earlier, it's deception. You're trying to trick the enemy into not hitting the correct target, or you're trying to mess with his electronics a little bit to make it a little less precise of a target. As I showed you a minute ago, you can always go over here to this wonderful Belugan campaign wiki, and you can, of course, take a look at the percent of kill reduction when you're looking at DECM. Now, this particular one mounted on the B-52, it's a 25% chance reduction of being hit by an enemy-guided weapon. That's incredible. That means if you're dealing with an S-400 or something like that, and it hits you at 50% at really long range, that's only a 25% chance to hit. That's nice. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that in action. So I've got myself a Sukhoi 27S, and I'm going to ask it very nicely to go ahead and fly over. I'm actually going to move it up a little bit so we don't have to watch too much of this fun. I'm going to shut these guys off for a second here because we're doing the other one now. Yeah, shut these guys all off. You guys don't need to be making so much noise. I'm going to shut you off. I'm going to come shut you off. Okay, we're good. Okay. So we're basically going to zip in. I happen to know that there is an enemy SAM battery somewhere down here. I believe it's right there. Yeah, it's an SA-11. That's a pretty nasty SAM battery. So we're just going to kind of scoot on in. I'll fast forward time a little bit. Yikes. And we're going to be entering into its effective range very shortly. Let's go ahead and switch to the other team real quick. I'm going to declare this guy hostile, which means he's going to flip on his weapon, and there's a missile on the way already. Okay, let's watch what happens. Let's switch back to these guys. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this up because I'm very interested in seeing what happens. We've just picked up a new kind of radar. It doesn't surprise me. There's the missile. Now watch this. So the missile's zooming in. Basically, he's got a missile warning system that's giving him a heads up. He's diving for the ground as fast as he can. Keep in mind, an SA-11 is a pretty lethal missile system. So yeah, he's diving. If only he had some offensive electronic countermeasures, then he wouldn't be able to fire because it wouldn't be a precise enough target. By the way, ships have jammers also because they're much bigger targets. They require much bigger jammers. I can't promise anything with those, unfortunately. And let's see what happens. Pause. Okay. Now check this out. Watch what happened. So the first thing that happened is our target fired a bunch of chaff. So he attempted to block him again. This is early technology. Completely actually, the chaff almost worked. Cool. Next, what happened is we turned our defensive jammer on, attempting to block the enemy missile. To do that, we needed a 15% chance of blocking that missile. That's that PK reduction. In this case, we rolled another dice. We failed that one too. And then finally, the missile itself arrived with a 75% chance to hit, reduced for distance. Keep in mind, the longer the shot, the harder it is to hit. We have some agility modifiers. He's a pretty decent pilot. We have an empty weight fraction. It's a bad shot. So the final percent chance to hit was a 53. The result was a 66. Now, if we had succeeded with this roll here, getting a 15 or less, so to speak, this missile never would have even gotten to make an attack. To be honest, it's going to be kind of rough. So again, you can see very clearly how that impacted and made things a little bit better. You've been very helpful, Sukhoi 27. You may return to base. Of course, in about half a second, there's going to be another missile on the way. You know how these things go. Now, if I were using offensive jammers here, it would have made this shot much trickier because, again, it would be partially blind. So that's basically all there is to offensive and defensive. Let's go ahead and put together a strike package to show you kind of how to use that in application here. So if you're going to be using offensive jamming, remember it's a standoff jammer. You're trying to jam the path you're taking to get to the target. So in this case, I know that the path I'm going to be taking to the target is going to look like this. Of course, if you were a smart commander, you'd come out here and then you'd scoot in here this way, but we're going to be a stupid commander just for demonstration purposes. So I know I'm going to have to jam basically a line this way in order to prevent these radars from detecting and this obnoxious SA-11 from attacking me as well. So to do that, I'm going to use a support mission. I know that his maximum range puts him right about here, so I'm going to go ahead and create two separate waypoints. I'm going to put it right on the edge because, again, the jammer is going to be much more effective if it's closer. I'm going to go ahead and do jamming support. I'm going to go ahead and set this up to support. Press okie doke. I'm going to go ahead and grab, yeah, 2 single aircraft is fine for me. I have 2 EA-6s ready to go. Set them in, and this is important. You want to make sure they are allowed to use their offensive jamming. Remember, when you turn this on, everybody's going to know you're there. Sort of, because again, it's going to be difficult for them to say. I'm going to go ahead and tell them to turn the active emissions on as soon as they take off to basically make it difficult. Continuous loop. So they're going to fly in and they're going to start driving back and forth here, jamming everything along this corridor, because this is where my F-16s are going to be arriving from. Let's go ahead and grab my targets. I'm going to call this strike it. Now you're probably saying, why don't I have one of the jammers stay with the attack group? I completely agree with that particular idea. The danger, though, is it's going to get itself shot down because any smart enemy will go for the expensive jammer first. Also, you're always going to have geometry issues. Like if the jammer's flying too high and your strikers are flying too low, it's not going to achieve the correct effect. Speaking of which, that's going to be a problem, as you'll see in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. I'm going to go ahead and grab all my F-16s. I'm going to go ahead and grab a few of them. I'm actually carrying harms because I'm not silly. I'm going to go mark them as escorts. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. I'll keep the escort group together. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. I am ready to go. Now watch this. My jamming support is going to be flying at an altitude of 36,000 feet. My strikers on the flip side, watch this. This is where everybody gets in trouble. Are going to be arriving at 36,000 feet. We're good to go. That was handy. If these were traditional Mark 84s, they'd be attacking at like say 1,000 feet, which would mean they'd be flying under my defense on my offensive jamming, giving every SAM site basically a free shot. So kind of keep that in your mind as well. Another warning, go ahead and unpause things and let things kind of proceed. Another warning here, and this happens a lot, is you'll put up your offensive jammers over here. They'll do a great job of blocking enemy missiles from engaging your aircraft. And then what's going to happen is your aircraft are going to pass over the heads of the enemy SAMs, and all of the sudden, this gets irritating, you're going to get shot at because you're offensive jamming is on the wrong side of the game. If you were very, very clever, which you guys all are, you'd put jamming on both sides of this island, which would mean that you can't get hit from the tail and you can't get hit from the front. Keep in mind, if you have standoff weapons, jamming is awesome because basically you can block them from seeing your standoff weapons until they get too close to the ground. Another thing I want to add with jamming is one of the best uses of it is with stealth technology. The stealth should not be doing the jamming. However, you can use stealth jammer. You can use a jammer behind a stealth aircraft in order to make it more effective. Let's go see what's going on here. Let's go ahead and launch you guys. Launch you guys. Oh, I set them on to 1/3 rule. I'm actually going to launch them individually. Okay, now we're good to go. Get up there. Thank you. All right, check this out. So our first jammer is arriving on station now. I'm actually going to tell that other jammer to join my group. You know what? Why not? Let's go ahead and assign to mission. Oh, notice he got passed by the F-16s because he's so slow. I feel bad for him. You'd never be able to catch up. Achoo! Okay, there we go. Let's see here. So he's on station. He's doing his jamming thing. Let's take a look at things from the perspective of the enemy. At this point, oh, make sure our radar's turned on, right? We did do that. Yeah, we left it on. We're good. At this point, we've just got a jam warning. Those modern EA6s have spectacular jamming equipment. We don't even know that there's a strike package en route, even though it's right there. Keep in mind, some enemies have low light television. They have forward-looking infrared that would be able to detect that target even though it's being jammed. Keep that in the back of your head. So basically, these guys are clueless. They're about to get wrecked, which is very, very cool. Go ahead and switch back to our attackers here. Speed up time a little bit. They're doing their little loopy-loop. Remember, we're using offensive jamming here. Let's switch back to the other side real quickly. Now notice, we know there's an attack group out here somewhere. They're just a very ambiguous target because of the fact that this jamming, which if you take a look, we're actually slightly off center. And let me fix that real quick. You guys, get over here. There we go, much better. They are slightly off center, so as a result, we are able to detect them through the jammers, which we can't even detect because they're doing such a good job of their job. Now, of course, if I did this and click this button, we'd know exactly where they are, but I'm not going to do that because that's mean. That's mean. All right, so let's go ahead and see what happens here. Go ahead and switch on our little God view here. So those jammers are still doing the standoff thing. Our F-16 buddies are now crossing. We have a good idea of roughly where they are. They're just not a very precise target because of that jamming. Now, of course, I'm going to do one of these things and declare these guys obviously hostile. They're coming for us. So now what this target's going to do is as soon as they get in the effective range, they're going to start raining SA-11s. But remember, there's a surprise, but you knew that already. So keep in mind, the jammers need to be behind them in order for them to be effectively protected. And again, this is only minor protection. Oh, it's starting to kick in again. This SA-11 is going to be locking onto these guys, and the missile's away. Now, notice, as soon as he flipped his attack radar on, his attack radar also got jammed, which means that these annoying harms, which I guarantee you that's what those are, he's not going to be able to get a precise hit on. Everybody's, of course, breaking up. I don't think these are home on jam. Let me see. Are they? Let's find out. Let's see here. Are they home on jam? Some of these guys are. No, they are not. Weapons like, I think the R-27, I believe, I think that's the AA-10 or the AA-11, does have home on jam capability. Same thing with an AMRAAM. So unfortunately, this stupid radar lit himself up, got himself blinded, fired a couple missiles, which aren't going to do a thing. Let's go ahead and take a look at the in-game calculations there. Yeah, that was never going to happen. It actually spoofed. Oh, game over. Sorry, thank you for playing. That was awesome, and that's a great, great strategy. So unfortunately, he's doing it again. Because remember, an SA-11 is a battery. It's not just one SA-11, it's multiple SA-11s. And what I'm really concerned with is one of our buddies probably ran out of harms at this point. Yeah, they have JDAMs left. So this might be a little annoying, but we'll make do with what we got. Look at it go! It has no idea where to go. Look at these guys. These guys are just going to duck. By the way, mountains provide the best form of jamming. Okay, escorts. You have to get a little bit closer. Oh, that's not good. Get behind the mountain. Get behind the mountain. Okay, this is bad. These aircraft over here now are completely vulnerable to this SA-11 because they're no longer in the path of the offensive jammers. So like I said, be careful. But the good news is they're in the path of this beautiful mountain here, which is going to make it very difficult for them to engage. What are these? These are JDAMs. Oh, you guys are going to get rained on, aren't you? You did not just turn around and go back to base, did you? Uh-oh. Sigh. By the way, the JDAM is a very small target. They're great. Goodbye. Splush. All right, let's continue with our attack. Unfortunately, our helpful escorts are no longer helpful. So now our offensive jammers are now providing us with this corridor of jamming. If we were smart, which we are, since we know that that SAM battery is out of operation, we'll actually move our jamming closer in case there's any enemy SAM sites here. All right, let's go ahead and speed up time real quickly. Everybody is depositing their weapons onto the target region. Keep in mind these are standoff weapons. We'll switch to the other guys real quick. And they had an SA-8 who has a pretty good idea of the location of these other aircraft. Why can we see them so well? Well, we're on the other side now of the radar. Since the jamming's over here, we can see perfectly in this direction. Older radars can't do that. So for example, if I flipped on the old radar and shut off the new one, actually that's not even a good example. Let's grab this one. If I flip this one on, we'd actually have difficulty seeing these guys because we're getting jammed so effectively. By the way, we can see these two aircraft now because of the fact that they're so physically close. We're just using our eyes. And we did a nice job. And of course, this SA-8 is blind to those incoming missiles. So if I were to flip on his radar real quick, there we go. Oh, there they are. Now we can see them. But notice he is also jammed. So even if he attempts to engage, like for example, if I did something like this, I don't know that he'll actually be able to engage that weapon because it's going to be too much of a deflection shot. It's, oh, there he goes. He's trying. I don't think it's going to go well. Oh no, look at that. We missed one of them. Let's find out why we missed one of them though. Let's see here. Yeah, unfortunately, those JDAMs are not benefiting from our jammers because of the geometry now. We'd have to have moved those jammers basically to here. Because remember, if you want to imagine this is up and down, if our jammer is here and our target is here and our bomb is here, we can't actually jam it. But it's good to see those SA-8s putting their hard work in here. Of course, he's probably just gone through half of his battery. And that's it. So as far as a successful mission goes, let's see how we did. So we blew up a barracks. We wasted a lot of those. They fired plenty of good stuff at us. These are our expenditures. Not bad. Okay, so just quick conclusions. Actually, before I do conclusions, there's one more piece. Sorry, I know you guys are tired. Some aircraft have the ability to lay what they call a chaff corridor. So if I were actually go like this, and I type in the word chaff, not every aircraft can do this. Let's go ahead and get a, there we go. But this particular aircraft has the ability to do it. What you can do is you can tell it to drop little pieces of metal in the air in a giant path to basically confuse older radars. This is great if it's like 1964. Not so great against modern aircraft that have Doppler filtering. But watch this. I can press this button. And what he'll do is he'll basically just dump chaff behind him like this. And you can see each one of these chunks of chaff has a specific altitude to it. So now if I were a aircraft, let's say a friendly aircraft, let's go ahead and put him right here. Let's call this, I like my F-16 CMs. What can I say? If I were to stick him in here, I'll just give him a Sidewinder. He can fly through this without damaging his engines. I don't know how that works. But here's the element. This chaff is between 35 and 36,000 feet high. You have to stay in the chaff for it to have a benefit. Let's go ahead and turn him around a little bit. Stick it right there. Okay, good. So I'm actually going to set his altitude to 35,550. Manual override. Now if I switch back to the other team real quick, you can see exactly what this looks like. So notice my radar is blasting away, but I can't see that F-16. Oh, wait a minute. Let's make sure we're doing this evenly. Oh, you guys got deleted. Okay, now notice, okay, there he is. Now, if I were to try to engage that target inside of that chaff corridor, I'd have a heck of a time doing it. Let me actually use an older sensor for this. Because again, like I was, that's not even going to work great. That's the problem. All the modern sensors are basically immune to the shenanigans. Is that working okay? Yeah, that seems to be being affected pretty bad. Again, it depends on the radar set. There we go. Now notice this F-16 is completely invisible while it's flying through this wall of basically little small pieces of metal. That's a decent strategy in the 60s, not the greatest strategy. All right, conclusions. So first things first, basically you have offensive, defensive, electronic countermeasures. Your defensive are basically always turned on. When a guided missile is about to hit your aircraft, not infrared guided, it's got to be radar guided, it's going to roll a dice. If it's less than that little magic number, it will automatically succeed at blocking the missile from hitting the target. Offensive countermeasures, you're basically making a lot of noise to basically blanket the enemy target with that noise. You're going to be denying your opponent range information, but you're also going to be letting everybody know where you are. To be effective with jamming, you need to get as close to the radars as you can, keeping in mind if your jammer is above the people you're trying to jam, it's not going to do anything. And also you need to keep in mind that the jammer is only effective in the direction it's jamming from. With that in mind, you should be pretty successful with it, and enjoy.